Here's my question for you this morning. What did the Unitarian Universalist say to the hot dog vendor? Make me one with everything. In essence, that's what Unitarian Universalism means. It means to recognize that we are one with everything. Uni means one, the root of unit, and unite, unity, and Unitarian and Universalist. And to be a Unitarian or a Universalist or a Unitarian Universalist means to claim an essential oneness with all of life. It means that we are one with the blowing clover and the falling rain. It means that we are one with the shimmering stars and the circling planets. It means that we are one with all the creatures of earth and sky. And it means that we are one with each other and one with the eternal. Probably the most famous Unitarian minister in the 20th century, A. Powell Davies, who served All Souls Unitarian Church in Washington, D.C., asked in one of his sermons, "Do you belong to a religion that says humankind is not divided except by ignorance and prejudice and hate? The religion that sees humankind as naturally one and waiting to be spiritually united? The religion that proclaims an end to all exclusions and declares a brotherhood and sisterhood unbounded? The religion that knows that we shall never find the fullness and the wonder and the glory of life until we are ready to share it? That we shall never have hearts big enough for the love of God until we've made them big enough for the worldwide love of one another." That's what a Unitarian is. And I'm going to start just saying Unitarian and not say Unitarian and Universalist or Unitarian Universalist from this point forward. But I'm talking about all of those in this sermon. It's someone who affirms that we are one with everything and with everyone with no exceptions. That's why a Unitarian says, "Make me one with everything," and not only when ordering a hot dog. And in fact, it's not that we need to be made one with everything, it's that we are already one with everything. We just need to learn how to fully embrace and celebrate that oneness. Now, I realize that this is an incredibly simple and yet totally profound idea, and that it's a very old and historic idea. This isn't some feel-good notion that someone discovered on the side of the box of some herbal tea somewhere. Although you might have found something that said something similar there. But this goes back thousands of years. In the Eastern religions, the idea of an essential oneness of all creation and all existence goes back to the Vedas of India, which are among the oldest recorded scriptures known. Now, and in the Western traditions, we see the roots in Judaism and Christianity. With Judaism, we see the birth of monotheism, or the idea of a universal God. You know, before that, every tribe had their own God that they prayed to, and there was this idea that my God is stronger than your God. And humanity was a lot like children on the playground today who argue, my daddy can beat up your daddy. Except in this case, it was my God can beat up your God. And the gods were fighting, and so were the people. And when one tribe conquered another, there was the idea that their God was stronger and better and more true. And people have been killing each other in the name of God ever since. But Judaism eventually proposed that there were not really multiple gods all fighting each other, but one universal God of all humanity that cared about the justice and well-being of all, including the widows, the orphans, the prisoners, and those left out and left behind. Judaism proposed that we are all essentially brothers and sisters, created in the image of one Creator God. Now, with Jesus, who was born and died a Jew 2,000 years ago, we've seen the beginning of Christianity, which teaches that all people are brothers and sisters as well. However, even the teachings of Jesus and the apostles have been used over the years to endorse such divisive and degrading institutions as slavery and segregation, used to incite the killing of Jews and Muslims and women as witches over the years. So the belief that we're all brothers and sisters is not enough in and of itself to unify the family of humanity. The dominant denominations of Christianity today continue to divide people. Not all the denominations, but the dominant denominations continue to divide people by endorsing men's superiority over women, discriminating against people who love people of the same gender, and by promoting prejudice towards other religions and beliefs. Now, my point here is not to disparage anybody else's religion. It always feels uncomfortable to even raise such a topic in polite company like this. But I believe that if the official representatives of any one of the three major Christian denominations in the world, the Catholics, the Baptists, or the Evangelicals, were here, they would openly explain without apology their understanding of God and doctrine and church policy, which includes a hierarchical relationship between men and women inside and outside of the church. That's just the way the world is from that worldview. The sinfulness and the immortality of people loving people of other genders. That's just the way that it's taught. And the belief that other religions, while they may not be dangerous, are certainly false and misguided and not the true work of God. My point is that even Christians and others who also believe in the unity of the human family are promoting a very specific kind of unity. It's unity that is thought to come from conformity to their particular beliefs. In other words, it is a unity that requires all gay people to become straight or celibate, requires women to know and accept their place, and requires that everyone believe what these believers believe. And in fact, that would be a form of unity, but not the one that we celebrate here. The other irony is that even if all of the world became Christian, it would still most likely be divided by denominations and practices. The divisions within the body of Christianity are quite extreme too, with one group sometimes calling the other group heretics or even agents of the devil. We have to look no further than our own local newspaper here in Tulsa to see paid ads by one church explaining that the use of instruments in worship is an abomination to God. And on television, we can still occasionally hear a televangelist refer to the Pope as the evil beast in the book of Revelation. So even if we try to teach the whole world to sing in perfect Christian harmony, we'll still probably be divided into camps and have hierarchies of believers. Now, it certainly seems like a crazy way for God to run a universe. I say all this to explain that the idea of the ideas of Unitarianism were born of this Jewish and Christian heritage. But the Unitarians have a very different approach to the unity of humanity. And our approach is different from that of any of the fundamentalists or conservatives or orthodox religions around the world. Fundamentalists of all kinds, be it Muslim, Hindu, Jew, or whoever, believe that their religion is the one true and correct faith. And that ultimately and ideally, everyone should come to know the truth as they know it. Now, underneath this belief is a common understanding that the human family is one. But for fundamentalists, unity comes through uniformity to their particular beliefs and practices. Unitarians, on the other hand, believe that the human family is one, but that our unity will not come from uniformity, but from learning to understand and appreciate each other in our blessed diversity. We see that the only way that we will create a world of peace and harmony and equality and justice is through building bridges of understanding and appreciation of our many differences. It's not about teaching the whole world to sing the same song, but learning to appreciate each other's songs that can ultimately bring harmony to humanity. And this approach runs counter to the idea that it is through one true doctrine that the world will someday be blessed. Do you know that in this church, before there was a mosque here in Tulsa, Muslims used to pray here in what is now the President's Room? Did you know that for 2 years the Jewish community of B'nai Amunah, just down the street here on Peoria, used this place of All Souls as their place of worship and education for 2 years while they were going through some remodeling? And did you know that the Tibetan Buddhist group, Bodhicharya of Oklahoma, held their services in this church for 2 years? And so here at All Souls, we have an intimate relationship with people of other faiths. And our point is that we do not think that they need to forsake their faith or traditions in order for the human family to live as one in peace and in harmony. We like them just the way they are. We dare to presume that people the world over will never all pray alike, love alike, vote alike, think alike, or believe alike. So this church is focused on building unity without uniformity, and on demonstrating that diversity does not have to mean divisiveness. In fact, diversity is something that can be cherished, should be cherished, and celebrated. But before we start congratulating ourselves and patting ourselves on the back, we have to look at the world around us and the incredible segregation of people by colors and classes and cultures and creeds. We have to look at the enormous levels of genocide and homicide and suicide today that are fueled by prejudice and hate and ignorance and greed. And we have to ask, what are people like you and me doing with a faith like this? Honest people want to know, are we walking our talk? If we know what we stand for, are we standing up for what we know? I purposely did not make this message about a history lesson about Unitarianism in Europe and America. You can come to my roots class, or one of our ministers' roots classes, and you can learn more than you ever wanted to know about church history and the roots of Unitarianism. Today's message is not meant to be about what others did in the past, but it's about what we are called to do now. It's not titled, "What Was a Unitarian?" That would be a historical sermon. It was purposely titled, "What is a Unitarian?" So I go back to the statement that the human family is one and is only divided by prejudice, ignorance, hatred, and greed. Being a part of this church is not just an exercise in developing elaborate theories and theologies about human togetherness and the nature of God or creation. No, we are being asked, how are you breaking down the walls of ignorance, prejudice, hate, and greed that divide, demean, and destroy the human family? How are you, in your life, today, this week, this month, this year, building bridges? This is a serious question about walking our talk. And we're not being asked how we can go out and help the Hutus and the Tutsis in Rwanda get along. We're not being asked or called to figure out how the Israelis and the Palestinians can get along. You and I are being asked something much more direct and powerful. We are being asked to continually work to learn to get along with someone or someones who look different, love different, think different, vote different, pray different, and maybe even speak differently than we do or you do. Now, that's not theoretical. That's real. That's as real as it gets. And it scares a lot of people who would rather remain comfortably numb in the bubble of their own little idiosyncratic perception of reality. But to be a Unitarian or to be a member of this church of All Souls by whatever name is to say, I do not want to die having lived my whole life in a bubble. It is to dare to journey to the crossroads of human understanding. It is to be a pilgrim willing to brave the dangers and harvest the blessings of a voyage into the unknown, rather than to remain in a comfortable but compromised sleep. So beginning on September 12th, with our big homecoming services and festivities, we will be kicking off a year of programs and activities where you'll be able to be with people, some of whom are just like you, and others who may be quite different from you, with whom you can learn with and sing with, be in a small group with, become friends with, feed the homeless with, teach with, eat with, and much more. Now, I could tell a lot of stories about people and what happens to them in this church sometimes when they've grown more free or more whole in who they are through engaging with people different from themselves. But I'm going to conclude this message with just one story. You probably know that this church is an official welcoming congregation. Now, what that means in our association is that we are welcoming and affirming of gay, lesbian, bisexual, and transgender people. Now, but this did not just happen. We had a 4-year process of education and discussion that led to a unanimous vote of this congregation. Well, during that 4 years, we held programs on Sundays and on Wednesday nights. There were sermons and seminars and speakers on subjects that most people don't like to talk about in polite company, and certainly not in church. Now, one Sunday after the service, an elderly lady in her 80s came up to me and said, "You're not going to believe what happened to me today." I said, "Try me." She explained that she was going to one of our Sunday morning Bible classes, and when she arrived and sat down, the class was already underway. She quietly took her seat in the front of the classroom. As she listened, it didn't take long for her to realize that she was in the wrong room. It turns out that she stumbled into a panel discussion about bisexuality. At first, she felt very uncomfortable, and she thought that she'd just get up and go. But then she realized that it might send the wrong message if she walked out. So, being the polite lady that she was, she stayed for the entire discussion. And she looked at me with the sweetest smile and said, "You know what? I'm glad I stayed." She explained that she would have never chosen to go to that class in a million years. But she said she learned a lot, and it made her think. And I noticed in the years that went by that she really opened her mind and became accepting. But let me explain that this is not just any woman. This is the woman who, when I came as a candidate before I was chosen to be the minister of this church, I was speaking to the alliances in Emerson Hall. It was like a mass interview from most of the oldest members and most dedicated members of this church. And this woman, who I'm telling you about, asked me a very pointed question. That's why I still remember it. I don't remember any other question I was asked. To be honest, I'm not sure I remember any other question I was asked that whole week. But she stood up and she said, "I just want to ask you one question. If you come here and become our minister, are you going to try to make this a welcoming congregation?" And she made it clear by her tone and her phrasing and her body language that this was something that she did not want. I explained that becoming a welcoming congregation was something that the congregation would have to decide to do, that it wasn't my choice or decision as the senior minister. However, I said that regardless of whether this congregation decides to go through the official process of becoming a welcoming congregation or not, it is very important to me that whatever church I serve is welcoming to all people, including lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people. And apparently, that answer satisfied the group that was there, because I'm the minister here 10 years later. But it was this truly kind and wonderful elderly woman who 3 years later wandered into the wrong classroom on a Sunday morning, and came out transformed. Now, it's always been my policy to ask permission before sharing a story like this from the pulpit. But in this case, I couldn't because this dear woman has since died. But I take some comfort in knowing that because of something that we did here, before her life was over, a little hole in her heart that allowed the cold winds of prejudice to blow through was restored. And somehow I imagine that this is how our world and our lives will be redeemed. One heart at a time, as we come to cherish one another. Welcome to All Souls, a church that tries to embody and celebrate the world as we hope it will someday become. I love you. Amen.